Hey everyone, it's Dana here with Love Soul Flowers, and we are going to be doing a tutorial tonight. And our tutorial is going to be getting a little bit back to the basics because we do have a lot of new customers, and sometimes it's hard to find some of those videos way far back in there. So we're just going to bring back for the next couple of weeks a few of the basics. It's always nice to hear it too, even if we've been doing it for a while. But tonight we're going to be talking about fluffing flowers, and if you've never even heard what that means, we'll explain it all in just a few minutes, but we're going to give some time for people to join. We'll tell you a little bit about our business here. We ship from California. That's where the warehouse is, and I'm here in New Jersey. And I get to do the videos and tutorials, which is really fun because I love teaching. And we have all of our videos stored on our YouTube channel, and that is youtube.com/lovesouloflowers. We also have a tips and tricks community group where you can post questions. You can also post pictures of things you're working on, get people's opinions, or just share what you've been doing. And that is facebook.com/groups/lovesouloflowers. So those are kind of two resources if you're also new. So if you're just joining us even for the first time, those are two things you might want to check out. But sometimes when you're looking through videos, I mean, you can search through our YouTube channel and just scroll. But we've got a lot there. So sometimes you're scrolling and scrolling and scrolling looking for something specific. But you can also do a search. And when you do a search, it will pull up, different kinds of videos too. But this way, when we do some basic things, bringing it back new, they'll be up at the top, and it won't be so much scrolling for some of you who do not know what they're doing yet. So also just to talk about a little bit about the flowers, what they come to you like, that kind of thing. We want to go over that again. Again, for some of you who have not purchased yet or who have purchased just for the first time. Sorry, I got fuzzies in my face here. So we're going to talk about fluffing tonight, and a little bit about how to make your flowers perfect by doing some fluffing. I know it sounds silly, but because these are wood, they can, be a little bit misshapen during shipping, and we'll show you some examples. Now, I did have a hard time finding actually flowers that really needed to be fluffed. So I'm actually going to probably try to damage them a little bit in my hand just so that you can see what it could be like or something. Even not just from our shipping, but even in your house, if you store them and they happen to be in a box and they get smushed or something like that, it's a good way to, get a visual here of how to make them perfect again. So we do have our sale still going on, up to 70% off. That's on our website, lovesouloflowers.com. And you will see everything that's on sale there. If you have a business and you've not signed up for a wholesale, go ahead and do that too. There's a little bit, a section there about wholesale, and you can sign up so that you get discounts all the time. But right now, we have an up to 70% off sale, and that's going to be ending soon, and it's while supplies last. So go grab stuff if you need it. And then we'll get into this little tutorial that we have tonight. So let me just try to show you. So I squeezed this one before I got it because it was perfect, but so I couldn't really fluff it. So I'm going to be damaging them first so that I can fix them back up for you. But this is a carnation, and I'm just squeezing it because I want to give a visual of how to do fluffing. But when you receive your flowers, let's just say like this one. See how sometimes the petals are curled in, a couple little chips and things like that. Obviously a little squish and stuff like that. That is completely normal. That passes quality control. What doesn't pass quality control is an excessive amount of chips, exceptional amount of broken petals, that kind of stuff. But if there's like one tiny little petal in a flower that's broken, it will pass quality control. Obviously, we can't throw away every single flower that comes to us, and because they're handmade, and also because they're shipped, they're not always going to be perfect. But there's so many things we can do to make them perfect. And one of the things is, if you see a petal that maybe has a little crack in it or something, you can take a tweezer or a little scissor and just cut it out. But we're talking about specifically tonight fluffing things, and that's kind of if maybe part of your flowers a little bit smushed on one side. Again, these are handmade products, but it's also a wood that is super flexible. So in a good way, they're flexible, so when you make things, they don't break easily. But in another way, they're flexible, so when they're boxed up, sometimes if one gets kind of pushed down, it could be a little bit squished. Now, again, this flower did not come like this. I squished it myself, but I'm going to show you how to do this one. But I want to show you a few other things that you might need to know about fluffing besides just being totally squished. So like a flower like this, which is our lotus, so it's not necessarily misshapen, but you may want to open it up. So we also use fluffing to open up our petals because when they're dried, obviously when you get them, they're dry. You know, the petals are not too flexible. You can break them if you try to bend them. And also, like if you try to bend them, it won't like stay in its shape. But the best way to do it is by fluffing, and we're going to show you how to do that too. So again, I just have a couple different examples here. And I'm also going to show you how to stem one of them at the end, because sometimes some flowers are easier to stem when you're fluffing. But if you are dyeing your flowers, you do not need to fluff them ahead of time, because basically almost the same process that you use to fluff is the same thing you're doing when you're dyeing. It's basically getting them wet and shaping them. So if you are dyeing your flowers, you do not need to fluff them ahead of time. Just fluff them while you're dyeing them. Okay, so I am going to use, here's a cup of water. It's just plain water. And I've got my vegetable glycerin. So this just keeps your flowers soft. So you would put this in if you are dyeing your flowers. So let's just make believe this is dye as well. You know, you put your paint in here, and then you put your little drop of glycerin in it. Now, we are going to be doing a video on dyeing again, because again, our last video is kind of a long time ago, and might be hard to find. So we are going to go more into depth about dyeing next time. But what we're going to do right now is use glycerin to fluff it as well. So the reason why I use glycerin to fluff it, even if I'm not dyeing it, is because it gives the petals even a softer feel, so that I can be more, like, not rough, but you know, I can open them up easier. They'll be softer and more flexible, and then that way, you know, it's an easier process. So I'm going to just put a little drop of this in, literally just a squeeze. Again, it's vegetable glycerin, and I'm just going to stir it in my water. Now, you can do it this way, where you have a cup of water. And there's going to be some flowers that I might need my paintbrush, but some of them I might be able to just dip. But if you also want to use a spritz bottle, I always suggest, like, if you have like old hairspray that's in a little spritzy bottle, or like the spray and leave-in conditioner where it gives like a mist, because you don't want to squirt it down, but you might want to just mist it. And that's for like if you just have a couple little petals you want to do and you don't really need to get it very wet. You can use a spritz bottle too, and those spritz bottles, you're just going to do the same thing, just water and a drip of glycerin and shake it up. Okay, so again, if that's just like a little minor fluffing that you need to do, those spritz bottles work really well. But let's just say we're going to do this one here. Let's just say your flower looks like this. Again, it did not come to me like this. I squeezed it just to make it super flat so that we can show you how to fluff things. And all I'm going to do is take my flower. Again, this is not, even if it came to you like this, let's say in, you know, shipping, it got stuck on the side of the box somehow and it got flattened. This is not considered damaged, because it is a perfect flower, because all you do is add water and it literally will look exactly the way it's supposed to. So the only thing that we consider damage is like majorly broken petals and that kind of thing. But squished is not, because it is literally just the flower being flexible, which it should be flexible. You want it to be flexible, but we do want it to be perfect when we make it. So what I'm going to do is take my water here, which has my glycerin in it, and I'm just going to dip my flower in, and I'm just going to rotate it so I get all the edges. And we're going to show you how, again, if you're new to this and you didn't realize it, how to make your flower back to be exactly what it looks like. So I'm just going to nice and gently peel my things back. So if I dip it in the water, it's pretty saturated. So it's kind of very flexible when it's saturated like that. So when you open up the petals, it's super easy to do that because it's pretty wet. But you may not want to do that if you don't need to wet your whole entire flower. But this one was very squished because I flattened it like a pancake. And so this one really needed to be pretty wet in order to regain its shape. But as you can see, if you received that flattened carnation, let's say in your box, you may think like, oh, this isn't going to be good. Well, literally a drop of water and you're perfect again. And the other thing about it too, again, if you had your paint mixture in here, you would do the same thing. You dip your flower in there, dye it, and then you could fluff it once it is dyed. Okay, so we took that flattened carnation that didn't look like a carnation and made it perfect, but just by like one quick dip. Now, here's the other thing. You do not want to let it just sit down in there in the water. You do not want to get these oversaturated. If you oversaturate them, a few things could happen. Especially if you have too much glycerin in there. They can get wilty and never like go back to normal, or they can get so wet that where they're tied, like it shrinks the petals so much that it starts to untie. So if those things happen to you, it means you kept it in the water too long. So you're going to just want to do a quick dip just to get it wet enough to reshape it. Okay, so let me just show you again. Another one that you might want to do that way where you dip it all in is something like a lotus or like a new beauty, or something that you're really wanting to open up the petals and you really need them nice and soft and flexible to do so. So let me just show you the lotus and show you how big it can get, how Fluffing can not only be just reshaping it in a way because it's like squished or something, but also reshaping it to be a different shape, more bloomed. So this is the lotus. See how it like fits in the palm of my hand. Now let me show you. I'm going to dip it again in my water and glycerin. And I always like to open up my lotuses. I don't really like to keep them closed. So I'm dipping it. Again, do you see how fast I put it in there? I didn't let it just sit and float in there because you don't want it to be oversaturated. Now, when you're fluffing a flower like this where you're wanting to open it, you always start on your outside layer. Now, I like to use my fingers. I feel like I have more control. And I'm going to just open it like layer by layer, but starting in the back. So again, lotuses and sometimes like new beauties and things, they don't come already open. But if you just add the water and glycerin, and again, if you're dyeing, it's the same thing. You would just put it in your dye mixture and then open it. They actually can be quite large of a flower and nice and bloomed. So let me just open that up and I'll show you. So I started in my back and now I opened it, and now look how wide my flower is now. So it really grows a lot when you open it, but it doesn't come pre-opened. So you might just want to put that in the water and glycerin. See how pretty it is? I'm going to show you this way too. So do you see how pretty? And I might as well address it while we're in this, but do you see these like little brown spots? Guys, those are just knots because these are wood flowers. So you have to expect that wood will have knots in them. So this is not considered damage to have brown spots in them. There might be a bunch. There might be wood grain. Here, look, you can even see the grain here. See how it's got a brown line through it? That's just the wood grain, as you can see. Again, these are wood flowers, so we've got to expect that they look like wood. So grains and knots and those kind of things are common and should be expected, and should be actually, you know, something that makes them special because, you know, they're wood. That's pretty cool. So here's one that's wide open. Now let me show you another thing where maybe you need some detailed work in fluffing and you don't want to just dip your whole entire flower because you don't want it to open up. So let's just take this little sunny guy and I'm going to stem it for you. I'm going to show you how to stem with a stem cover at the same time. And we're going to use a paintbrush to actually fluff this one. So if you've never stemmed a flower with a stem cover, you're just going to put the blob of glue on the back of your flower. I like to use a half wire stem. I put it right through the glue and then I put my stem cover right on into that blob of glue. Okay, so that's how easy it is to use a stem cover stemming. And this might help if you just want to get some of your petals and you don't really want to get the whole thing saturated, because here's the thing about getting it saturated. Obviously you have to let them dry, so you can't use them right away. And let's say I didn't want to dye this and I just wanted to use it right now, but I wanted to fix the petals, so I didn't want to make it soaking wet. This is a good way to do that. Now the other two that are really wet, you cannot use these until they are super fully dry, because if you put them in an arrangement and they're a little damp, you can create some mold on it because you're putting moisture and you're not letting it out. So make sure that when you are fluffing, if you do wet them, that you let them 100% bone dry. Put them in front of a fan or whatever before you use them. Now remember too that, and I like to use it like, I like things to dry like 72 hours, like under a fan, because even if the outside petals feel dry, sometimes the center keeps moisture in it and then you don't realize it, and then sometimes when you're stemming it you realize it, but you don't realize it and you're actually trapping some moisture in there. But anyway, I'm just gonna see how there's like some curled petals. and they're not perfectly straight. So I'm just going to actually dip my brush into the water and glycerin. Again, this is just water and glycerin. And I'm just going to actually brush the petals that I want straight. So again, if you have a major smush issue or you want to bloom your flower open, you can certainly dip it directly in your water and glycerin. But if you're just wanting a couple petals because you don't want to wait too long to let it dry, then you're just going to tap your brush. Let me see if I can get this around. And straighten those out. So those little curled center ones, now they're nice and straight. Okay? And again, you don't have to do this process if you're going to dye flowers. You're just going to do it while you're dyeing flowers because you've got to saturate them anyway. So this is just for if you're going to leave them raw. Okay? So that's another one. Let me see. And then we have like something like this where maybe one side of it is a little funky. Again, you can use a brush and just straighten out the few petals, or you can just dip that half in there. And once it's wet, they're super flexible and you can bend it right into shape. So if you are watching this on a replay and you have questions about fluffing, feel free to ask it in our comments. And we certainly will come back and answer you. And if you are, you know, someone who's seasoned at fluffing, just a reminder that, you know, the flowers do have to travel and may need to be fluffed to be perfect, but it's a quick process. You can do a bunch of them even at a time. You can get a big bowl of water and glycerin and just go dip, 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 and then let them dry and fluff them as they're drying. But it's not really a difficult process. It's just having to do it in a way where you're not going to break it, which means you're going to want them wet enough that the petals are flexible, but not too wet where you oversaturate it and just becomes a shriveled mess. And remember, I used some vegetable glycerin in my water, and I just did a little bit of like shoop, and then I was done. So you don't need a ton of it. It's not like a big blob of it. And then you can do spritz. Yes. So for the pre-dyed flowers, if you get dyed flowers, I think I have one right here. Where'd it go? Let me just get a pre-dyed flower here. Let me get a pre-dyed flower for you. So here's a pre-dyed flower. And let's say, again, pre-dyed flowers actually might need fluffing a little more than even regular because, again, once they're put in there. But either way, it's totally fixable if something is smushed or not. This is my dyed flower. This is not from Love Sola, just so you know. So don't ask what this color is because this was just one that I had dyed. But if it's a little tough, even though Love Sola, if you have dyed flowers from Love Sola, they do use glycerin, so they are nice and soft and flexible. If you've dyed your own flowers and maybe you didn't use glycerin the first time around, or maybe you dyed flowers a long time ago, you used glycerin, but you still wanted a little bit more squishy, you can still use the same process with a flower that's dyed. But what I do suggest is if it's dyed, I suggest the dipping method. You can do a spritz if it's just a little bit on the side or something like that. But if you're trying to totally soften a flower that's already dyed, I would definitely dip it. And so I'm just going to show you. Okay. And you can see already that it was pretty hard because it was already dried with paint, and how flexible it can become just by putting it in there. So you don't need anything like new process or anything, which is really nice. But if you need to just, you know, dip it in there to separate some of your petals. Let me shake it out there. Okay, and that's a way to soften them, but also if they're a little misshapen, it'll help you, you know, get it back into shape. So again, if you buy dyed flowers from Love Sola, we do soften them with glycerin already, so they should be kind of soft. But if you're just wanting to reshape it, open it, or if you have your own flowers that are needing to be, you know, softened or reshaped, you can do it. But do you see, even with it being dyed, it turns back to nice and squishy and flexible. The petals are nice as soon as you dip it into that water. If you have a bunch of skinned flowers, and skinned flowers are, I don't know if I have any right here right now. Skinned flowers, you know, have the bark still on them. They're a little harder even. you can put a little bit extra glycerin in those, and you can use hot water. So if I'm doing, I don't do hot water for regular raw because sometimes it becomes too mushy and whatever, and I don't like it like that. So I do use cold water for the dyed flowers and raw flowers, but for skinned flowers, because they have the bark and they're a little hard, sometimes those flowers come and they're a little misshapen, and even water like doesn't really like get it moving. You can just put hot water, the drop of glycerin, and then when you dip it in, like hold it in the hot water for just a little bit, and then it softens it up enough to be able to move those types of petals. But yes, if you have already dyed your flowers and they're not soft or they're misshapen, this is the same process. You're just going to dip it in the water and glycerin. You won't hurt them, but again, before you use them, make sure they are bone dry. If you do dye them the way we do with Bear brand paint, it won't run. So even though it's wet, it's not going to leave any color anywhere. It won't leave color in your water because it's paint and it's absorbed. But if you use like Rit dye and stuff, I don't know if that'll make it. I've never tried the other dyes, so I can't promise that wouldn't make them run. But with the paint, you're all good to just dip and go. I think that's kind of it about the basics of fluffing. If anyone, like I said, has any questions, please let us know. If you have any like follow-up questions that you need a lot of answers to, ask it in our community group. Again, that's facebook.com/groups/love-soul-of-flowers, because there's a lot of people who have a lot of experience in there, and we will answer your question, make sure that you know what's going on. But really, it's kind of a fun process to make them, especially like the lotuses. Like making it look like a whole new flower is fun. And if you're dyeing your flowers, it's part of the process anyway, so it won't take you any extra time. But we did just want to let you know, again, that our flowers may come a little squished sometimes. You never know what happens in a box. Obviously, we don't want them to be, but because they are soft and flexible, it's just the nature of boxing something up when it's soft and flexible. So when you get them, it's just a simple process to make them perfect. And that's it. You get to use them. But again, make sure they are dry. That is my biggest thing about fluffing, is that I know a lot of people like to even soften their undyed flowers, but then they forget that they can't put them in a covered Tupperware box or something like that when they're a little damp, because we don't want any dampness at all in them when you pack them up. All of our flowers should be stored in an open box. Some people even put those little like silica packets in it to make sure that if it's in the basement or something, it's not getting any extra moisture. But you don't want to seal them tight. Even if they're raw, just because the air could be humid and wet, you don't want to trap moisture in them. So keep them nice and aired out. But especially if you're going to do this process, don't put them back in. I would give it more than 24 hours. I would say if you're going to do fans directly on them, 48 hours would be fine. But I like to give it time because I don't ever want to risk losing flowers to mold or shriveled up stuff. So. All right, everyone, that's it for tonight. We are going to talk about dyeing flowers next time. Again, we're going to just do a couple basic things. We're going to show you how to stem like some difficult flowers, do all that. And then we're going to also talk about stemming, dyeing, fluffing, and then like trimming petals and stuff to make them perfect, because again, these flowers aren't really supposed to be perfect. They come imperfect, but they're beautifully imperfect, and we can make them perfect if we're there. I usually tend to not make my flowers perfect, actually. I like to use them exactly how they come because I figure that flowers in nature aren't perfect, and to me it looks more realistic than every petal being like it was cut from a machine, because these are not. Everything is hand done. So if you're the kind of person like me who like kind of embraces their quirkiness, more power to you. But if you are someone who really wants every single flower perfect, I get that too. And we will show you how to do that in the next few weeks. All right, everyone, if you have questions, again, leave them in the comments and we will come and answer them. Bye, everyone. Have a good night.